Hello, everyone. Welcome to Sleep Space. Tonight, we will talk about a question that has fascinated philosophers, scientists, and dreamers alike. Are dreams proof that reality is flexible? More specifically, can the strange logic of dreams teach us something about the nature of consciousness and about the possibility that reality itself is not as rigid as we think? I want to give you a warm welcome and thank you for being here. Before we dive into this deep exploration, let me ask you something. What time is it where you are right now, and where are you watching from? Go ahead and share that in the comments. It's always amazing to see the reach of these conversations spanning across time zones, continents, and perspectives. Now, let's begin with something you've experienced countless times but rarely stop to analyze: a dream. You close your eyes, drift off to sleep, and suddenly you are walking through a city where gravity doesn't quite behave as it should, or speaking to someone who passed away years ago, or discovering that you can fly simply by deciding to. None of this surprises you while you're dreaming. You accept the bending of rules without question. But when you wake up, you notice the difference. Reality seems solid, unshakable, logical, with laws of physics that can't be broken. At least that's how it feels. But what if reality is not as unchanging as we believe? What if dreams are showing us a hidden truth? That reality is more pliable, more dependent on consciousness than we've been taught? Science is beginning to explore these questions in new ways, and when we link the study of dreams to the study of consciousness, some surprising patterns start to emerge. To understand why this question matters, we first have to look at what dreams actually are. A dream is a mental state where your brain generates entire worlds, complete with sensations, characters, landscapes, and emotions, all without external input. The visual cortex fires as though you are seeing, the auditory cortex lights up as though you are hearing, and your emotional centers process experiences as though they are truly happening. To the dreaming brain, the dream world is real. The only difference is that it is internally generated rather than externally triggered. This already raises a powerful question. If your brain can create a reality indistinguishable from waking life, what makes waking life itself more authentic? Neuroscience usually points to consistency. Waking life follows predictable laws. Fire burns, objects fall downward, time moves forward. Dreams, on the other hand, are inconsistent. One moment you're in your childhood home, the next you're in a futuristic city. Logic bends and twists. Yet some scientists argue that this inconsistency doesn't make dreams less real. It simply means they reveal a different mode of reality, one shaped directly by the mind rather than by external stimuli. Let's think about this with an example. Imagine you're dreaming of standing on a beach. You feel the sand between your toes, you hear the waves crashing, you smell the salt in the air. Your body reacts as if it's truly there. If someone measured your brain waves, they would see patterns similar to those that appear when you're actually standing on a beach in waking life. The sensory experience is constructed so vividly that your brain doesn't really distinguish between the two. If that's the case, then what defines real becomes much less clear. Philosophers have wrestled with this question for centuries. Descartes famously wondered whether our waking life could itself be a dream, indistinguishable from reality. Eastern philosophies, like Buddhism, have long described reality as a kind of dreamlike illusion, a projection of the mind that feels solid only because of how consciousness interacts with it. In modern times, simulations theory suggests that the universe itself might be a constructed reality, not so different from the way a dream constructs worlds for us every night. But what makes dreams especially fascinating is how they defy the normal rules we take for granted. In dreams, time stretches and compresses. You can live through what feels like hours or days in just a few minutes of REM sleep. Physics bends, you can pass through walls, teleport, or breathe underwater. Identity is flexible, you can inhabit another person's perspective or be both observer and participant at once. These dream qualities mirror some of the paradoxes we see in quantum physics, where particles exist in multiple states until observed, and where the act of observation itself shapes outcomes. It suggests that both dreams and reality share a strange dependency on consciousness to stabilize them. So when you dream, are you just experiencing random brain noise? Or are you touching a deeper layer of consciousness, one that reveals the malleability of reality itself? This is where science and philosophy begin to overlap. Neuroscientists studying lucid dreaming have shown that when people become aware they are dreaming, they can actually alter the dream world intentionally. They can choose to fly, summon objects, or shift entire landscapes just by focusing their mind. The dream bends to intention. If this is possible in dreams, could it also suggest that intention plays a larger role in waking reality than we assume? Some studies suggest that the brain doesn't draw as hard a boundary between dream and waking states as we think. During daydreams, for example, similar brain regions activate, blending imagination with perception. When you visualize something vividly, your brain engages the same neural pathways as when you actually perceive it. This overlap hints at a continuum between imagined reality and waking reality, rather than a strict divide. In other words, reality may be partly constructed by the mind even when we're awake. And here's where things get really interesting. If dreams show us that consciousness can generate entire realities, and if waking perception is also shaped by consciousness, then the solidity of reality might be more flexible than it seems. Dreams could be training grounds where the mind practices bending the rules, reminding us that what we call reality is deeply intertwined with the observer. They are not just meaningless nighttime stories, they were evidence of the brain's ability to build realities from the inside out. Tonight, we'll explore this question from many angles. We'll dive into neuroscience, philosophy, and physics, looking at how dream logic challenges the idea of a fixed universe. We'll investigate whether consciousness is the foundation of reality and whether dreams are hints of that truth. We'll also consider the possibility that waking reality is itself a kind of shared dream, stabilized by collective agreement and physical laws we don't yet fully understand. So settle in, wherever you are, and let's begin this journey into the mystery of dreams, consciousness, and the nature of reality. When we think about dreams as just random neural firings, we miss their most profound lesson. They reveal how powerful the mind is in constructing what we perceive as reality. The key here is perception. Everything you experience, even when awake, is filtered and shaped by your brain. You never actually experience the world directly. Instead, you experience your brain's best guess of what's out there, a simulation built from sensory input. In a sense, waking life is itself a controlled hallucination, and dreams are simply the mind's way of loosening those controls. Let's break this down scientifically. When photons hit your eyes, they trigger electrical signals in your optic nerves. Those signals travel to the visual cortex, where they are translated into images. But those images aren't direct snapshots of reality, they're reconstructions. Your brain fills in blind spots, smooths over missing information, and adds depth and colour that aren't present in raw data. Similarly, sound waves are converted into neural impulses and interpreted as voices, music, or noise. Smells, tastes, textures, all of them are interpretations created inside your head. Waking reality feels solid only because your brain is remarkably consistent in its interpretations. Now compare that with dreams. During REM sleep, sensory input from the outside world is largely cut off. The brain is left to generate experience internally, and it does so with the same tools it uses in waking life: the visual cortex for images, the auditory cortex for sounds, and the limbic system for emotions. This is why dreams can feel so real. The machinery of perception is the same. The only difference is that the data comes from within instead of from the external world. This leads us to an intriguing thought. If both dreams and waking life are constructed simulations, what makes one more real than the other? The difference may not be in their substance, but in their stability. Waking life is anchored by external consistency, the shared environment we all interact with. Dreams, by contrast, are untethered, shaped entirely by internal states. Yet the fact that both rely on the same brain systems suggests that reality is always filtered, always shaped, and therefore always flexible. Here's another perspective worth considering. Cognitive science has shown that expectation shapes perception. If you expect to see something, your brain is more likely to interpret ambiguous input in that direction. For example, in experiments where participants are shown quick flashes of unclear images, they often perceive what they anticipate, not what is objectively there. This is called top-down processing, where the brain uses prior knowledge and expectations to fill in sensory gaps. Dreams operate almost entirely through top-down processing, with the brain weaving stories from fragments of memory, emotion, and imagination. But waking life, too, is filled with top-down influences. This blurs the line between dream and reality even further. Think about déjà vu, that uncanny sense of having lived a moment before, maybe the brain misinterpreting present experience through the filter of memory, creating a strange overlap between imagined and real time. Or think about hallucinations in waking life, whether caused by illness, substances, or sensory deprivation. These are dreamlike states intruding into wakefulness, showing that the brain is fully capable of producing realities independent of external input. Now let's turn to the role of consciousness itself. Dreams highlight a fascinating feature of consciousness: its ability to create entire worlds with their own logic. But here's the crucial part. While you are inside a dream, you rarely question its validity. You don't pause and say, "Wait, this can't be real because physics doesn't work this way." You accept it because your conscious awareness adapts to the rules of the dream world. This adaptability suggests that consciousness is not bound to one set of universal laws. Instead, it adjusts to whatever framework is presented. If consciousness is this flexible in dreams, why not in waking life? Neuroscience has started to look into this question by studying lucid dreaming. When someone becomes lucid, that is, aware that they are dreaming, they can intentionally manipulate the dream. They can decide to fly, to summon objects, or to shift the scenery. What's happening in the brain during this state? Researchers using fMRI scans have found increased activity in the prefrontal cortex, the area associated with self-awareness and executive control. Essentially, lucid dreaming brings more waking-like consciousness into the dream, allowing intentional control over the simulation. This is powerful evidence that consciousness doesn't just passively experience reality, it actively shapes it. Now imagine carrying this principle into waking life. If perception is already shaped by expectation, intention, and focus, then reality itself might be more malleable than we think. Experiments in psychology show that mindset can alter performance, health, and even perception of pain. The placebo effect is a striking example. Patients given sugar pills experience real improvements in health simply because they believe they are being treated. Their expectation rewires their reality at a biological level. Could dreams be showing us the extreme version of this? where belief and intention can completely rewrite the rules of the environment. Some scientists suggest that dreams are not random nonsense, but rather simulations the brain runs for problem solving and adaptation. According to the threat simulation theory, dreams evolved as a way for humans to rehearse survival scenarios in a safe space. You dream of running from predators, confronting dangers, or navigating social challenges so that when similar situations arise in waking life, your brain is better prepared. But if dreams are rehearsal spaces, they also reveal that the brain doesn't strictly distinguish between imagined and real experience. Neural pathways strengthened in dreams can carry over into waking abilities. Much like mental rehearsal in athletes improves performance even without physical practice. Again, the boundary between dream and reality blurs. Philosophers like David Chalmers, who coined the term the hard problem of consciousness, argue that subjective experience, the inner movie of the mind, cannot be reduced to physical processes alone. Dreams highlight this mystery. Where does the richness of dream experience come from? Why does consciousness have the ability to generate not just abstract thoughts, but fully immersive realities? These questions lead some thinkers to propose that consciousness is not just a byproduct of the brain, but a fundamental feature of the universe itself. If so, then the flexibility of dreams may reflect the flexibility of reality at its deepest level. Quantum physics adds another layer of intrigue. At the smallest scales, particles don't behave like solid objects. They exist in probabilities until measured, and the act of observation collapses them into definite states. This phenomenon, known as the observer effect, parallels the role of consciousness in dreams. Just as awareness stabilizes a dream, perhaps awareness stabilizes physical reality. Some interpretations of quantum mechanics even suggest that reality is participatory, that consciousness is necessary for the universe to take shape. If that's the case, then dreams may not be illusions at all. They may be windows into the pliability of existence itself. Think about it this way. When you dream, your mind proves it can create an internally consistent world complete with rules, sensations, and experiences. When you wake, you enter a different kind of consistent world, one shared by others. The difference is not that one is real and the other fake, but that one is private and the other collective. Both are generated, stabilized, and interpreted by consciousness. And if both are products of consciousness, then reality itself is far more flexible than we typically assume. If dreams teach us anything, it's that reality is not fixed. It is experienced, interpreted, and constructed by the mind. To dig deeper into this, let's look at what modern neuroscience reveals about brain states. During REM sleep, when most vivid dreaming occurs, the brain is as active as it is when awake. Electrical activity surges, especially in areas responsible for emotion, memory, and imagination. Yet the prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for logic and critical thinking, becomes less active. This is why the bizarre events of dreams feel normal at the time. The editor of the brain takes a break, allowing reality to flow in unusual directions. This loosening of logical constraints creates a fascinating state, a reality built on pure experience rather than analysis. You can walk through a wall without questioning how it's possible, because your brain isn't applying physical laws in the same way. What this shows us is that reality, even in waking life, may depend heavily on what parts of consciousness are engaged. If perception relies on interpretation, and interpretation can shift depending on brain activity, then reality itself may be less solid and more fluid than we imagine. Consider how perception can be altered in waking states. Meditation, for instance, can lead to experiences of timelessness, unity, or expanded awareness. Psychedelics, too, have been shown to dissolve ordinary structures of reality, producing dreamlike visions and a sense of interconnectedness. In both cases, the brain enters states that resemble dream activity, reduced activity in the default mode network, increased cross communication between sensory regions, and a loosening of rigid patterns. These altered states suggest that reality is not simply out there, but co created by the brain's mode of operation. Now, here's a thought experiment. What if waking reality is simply a highly stabilized dream, one maintained by collective agreement and sensory input? Think about it. When you dream, your brain constructs the world alone. When you wake, your brain still constructs a world, but it does so in coordination with signals from the environment and the reinforcement of other people's experiences. Reality becomes shared through consensus. Fire burns because everyone agrees on the laws of thermodynamics and because consistent physical interactions reinforce those laws. But if perception is a kind of negotiation between brain and environment, could it be more flexible than we think? This idea has roots in philosophy. George Berkeley, an 18th century philosopher, argued that reality exists only in the mind of the observer. To him, physical objects are collections of perceptions, colours, shapes, textures that cannot exist independently of being perceived. The only reason the world doesn't vanish when you close your eyes, he said, is because it remains perceived by a higher consciousness. Whether or not you agree with Berkeley, his perspective highlights how deeply intertwined reality is with perception. Dreams bring this into sharp focus, since they show us that perception alone is enough to generate a world. Let's take a closer look at how memory shapes both dreams and waking life. In dreams, your brain stitches together fragments of memory into strange narratives. A friend's face might appear on a stranger's body, or a childhood home might exist in a futuristic city. These combinations reveal that the brain is not replaying experiences exactly, it is remixing them. But here's the surprising part. The brain does the same in waking life. Memory is not a perfect recording. Every time you recall something, you reconstruct it, blending fragments with current context. This means that your waking reality is always partly imagined, built from memory, just as dreams are. The distinction between dream and reality grows thinner the more we study it. Now, add to this the concept of neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself. Every thought, every experience, every dream leaves a trace. Neural connections strengthen or weaken depending on what you focus on. This means that the worlds you create in your mind, whether in dreams or in imagination, have lasting impacts on your brain structure. In a very real sense, the flexible logic of dreams alters waking reality by reshaping the neural pathways that define how you perceive and act. Dreams don't just reflect reality, they change it. Think also about creativity. Many groundbreaking discoveries and works of art emerged from dreams. The chemist Friedrich Kekulé dreamed of a snake biting its tail, which inspired his discovery of the ring structure of benzene. Paul McCartney dreamed the melody of Yesterday. Nikola Tesla often claimed his inventions came to him fully formed in visions, similar to lucid dreams. If dreams can offer new truth about the world, then they are not meaningless illusions. They are evidence that consciousness has access to insights beyond ordinary waking logic. This suggests that dream logic, while strange, might actually be a doorway to deeper aspects of reality. And here's another layer. Time in dreams doesn't behave like time when awake. You can live through what feels like hours in just a few minutes of REM sleep. Neuroscientists don't fully understand why, but it shows that subjective time is flexible. In waking life, too, time perception changes. moments of danger or awe can feel elongated, while routine days vanish quickly in memory. This subjectivity suggests that time, like space, is experienced through the lens of consciousness rather than as an absolute. Dreams reveal the extreme end of this flexibility, showing us that reality is not bound by one strict timeline, but shaped by awareness itself. Quantum physics again offers parallels. In the quantum world, time is not as straightforward as it appears in our daily lives. Particles can become entangled, influencing one another instantly across vast distances, as if space and time do not constrain them. Experiments with time perception in psychology show similar elasticity in the mind. Could it be that both the physical universe and the inner universe of dreams share a fundamental flexibility, waiting for consciousness to define their structure? All of this leads us to a radical possibility. Dreams are not mistakes or meaningless side effects of the brain. They are demonstrations of consciousness's power to create, bend, and reshape reality. They strip away the usual rules to remind us that the universe itself might not be rigid, but fluid, dynamic, and deeply linked to awareness. What you experience as real could be more like a canvas painted by perception, memory, and intention than a fixed, unchanging structure. Dreams may be the mind's way of hinting at this truth. One of the most fascinating aspects of dreams is how they play with identity. In dreams, you are not always confined to the same sense of self that you carry in waking life. Sometimes you are yourself, but at a different age. Sometimes you are an observer watching from the outside. Other times you merge with another person, seeing through their perspective. This fluidity of identity suggests that the self is not a fixed entity, but a construct that can shift, adapt, and dissolve depending on the state of consciousness. Neuroscience supports this view. The sense of self is linked to a network in the brain called the default mode network, which integrates memories, expectations, and self-referential thoughts. During dreaming and altered states, activity in this network can change dramatically, leading to the dissolution or transformation of identity. This shows us that who we think we are is not as solid as we believe. It is another flexible construct of consciousness. Dreams reveal that the self, like reality, can be fluid. This idea connects directly to certain philosophical and spiritual traditions. In Buddhism, the concept of no self teaches that the self is an illusion, a temporary collection of experiences and perceptions rather than a permanent entity. In Hindu philosophy, the self is seen as a fragment of universal consciousness, with individuality being more like a mask than an ultimate truth. Dreams give us direct experiential glimpses of this as we slip in and out of identities, proving that the boundaries of the self are not fixed. But identity is not the only flexible element. Space in dreams also bends. You can move from one location to another instantly, without any sense of travel. A room can expand endlessly or shrink into impossibility. Distances collapse and geography rearranges itself in ways that make sense only within the dream. This is strikingly similar to the way space behaves in physics at extreme scales. In the fabric of space-time, distance is not absolute but relative, and under conditions like black holes or cosmic inflation, space can stretch or fold in ways that defy common sense. Dreams seem to mimic this elasticity, suggesting that the brain naturally produces realities where space is not fixed but adaptable. Now let's consider causality. In waking life, we expect causes to precede effects. Strike a match, and then it burns. Drop a ball, and then it falls. But in dreams, causality can reverse or vanish entirely. You may find yourself in the middle of an event without remembering how you got there, or you may experience effects without any clear cause. Time can loop, skip, or fold back on itself. Remarkably, this resembles certain interpretations of quantum physics, where cause and effect are not always straightforward. In some experiments, particles seem to behave as if future events influence the past. If dreams reveal a reality where causality is flexible, could this be a hint that the universe itself is less bound by linear time than we assume? To understand this better, let's think about lucid dreaming again. In lucid dreams, the dreamer becomes aware of the dream and can influence it intentionally. People often report the ability to summon objects, change scenery, or control their own actions with precision. What's interesting here is that these changes happen instantly, without the step-by-step causality of waking life. If you want to fly, you simply decide and you rise into the air. The cause is pure intention, and the effect is immediate. This direct link between thought and reality suggests that dreams reveal a deeper truth. Consciousness itself may be the fundamental cause, with physical processes being only one way that cause manifests in waking life. Think of the placebo effect once again. In medical studies, patients who believe they are receiving treatment often improve, even when given inert substances. The mind expects healing and the body responds accordingly. This demonstrates that belief and intention are not powerless. They can shape biological reality. Dreams show us the most extreme form of this, thought instantly reshaping the world. If waking life is slower and more consistent, it may only be because it operates within more stable collective agreements. But the principle remains: the mind and reality are inseparable. Now consider memory inside dreams. Often you find yourself in a dream scenario with memories that you accept as true, even if they contradict your waking memories. You might believe you have always lived in a dream city, or that a dream character has been your friend for years. These false memories are convincing because consciousness accepts them as context. This demonstrates just how flexible memory is, and by extension, how flexible reality is. If memory can be rewritten in an instant, and memory is part of what anchors reality, then reality itself can shift as easily as the mind allows. This idea is not just theoretical. Research into false memories shows how easily the human mind can be convinced of events that never occurred. Entire groups of people can share false recollections, a phenomenon known as the Mandela effect. This raises the possibility that waking reality, like dream reality, is stabilized not only by sensory input, but also by collective memory and belief. Dreams exaggerate this principle, but the underlying mechanism may be the same. When we ask whether dreams prove that reality is flexible, we need to explore how science defines reality in the first place. In physics, reality is often described as a set of consistent laws: gravity, thermodynamics, electromagnetism, rules that don't bend depending on who is observing them. Yet quantum mechanics shows that at the smallest scales, reality does bend. Particles behave like waves until observed, exist in multiple states at once, and can influence each other instantly across space. The world of physics is stranger than any dream, and yet it underlies everything we consider solid. Dreams mirror this strangeness. They show us a reality where contradictions coexist, where you can be in two places at once, where objects appear and vanish without cause, where the impossible becomes ordinary. In a dream, your mind doesn't hesitate to accept these contradictions. This acceptance demonstrates how consciousness adapts reality to fit its context. Quantum physics may be pointing to the same principle, that reality itself is shaped by observation, and that the observer plays an active role in bringing it into form. Psychology adds another dimension to this. Studies in perception reveal that the brain is constantly predicting and constructing what we see. Vision is not a simple reflection of the outside world, it is a controlled hallucination guided by input. For example, optical illusions expose how the mind fills in gaps or interprets ambiguous information incorrectly. When you stare at a visual trick, your brain insists on seeing something that isn't there. This is waking dream logic, proof that perception is flexible even when you are fully awake. Now think about imagination. When you vividly picture something in your mind, the same brain regions activate as when you actually perceive it. Athletes often use visualization to improve performance, and brain scans show that imagined practice strengthens the same neural pathways as real practice. In essence, the brain cannot always tell the difference between imagining and experiencing. This means that your mind already lives in a space where reality and imagination blur. Dreams simply amplify this phenomenon, creating immersive realities from imagination alone. Consider the implications. If consciousness has the power to generate worlds in dreams, influence perception in waking life, and alter the body through belief, then reality is not a fixed container, but a process shaped by awareness. This doesn't mean the physical world doesn't exist. It means that how you experience it, how you interpret it, and even how you influence it are tied to the flexibility of consciousness. This is where simulation theory enters the discussion. Philosophers and scientists like Nick Bostrom argue that advanced civilizations could create simulations so convincing that the beings inside would not know they were simulated. If this is possible, then statistically, we may already be living in such a simulation. Dreams provide a personal analogy. Each night, your brain runs its own simulation, complete with characters, physics, and narrative. When you are inside it, you don't realize it's simulated. If your own mind can create convincing simulations, why couldn't the universe itself be a grander version of the same? Let's also look at shared dreaming experiences. Though controversial, there are countless reports of people having similar dreams or meeting in dreams with uncanny consistency. While mainstream science is cautious about these claims, they raise intriguing questions. If multiple minds can connect in dream space, could consciousness itself be networked at a deeper level? If so, dreams might be evidence not only of flexible reality, but of interconnected reality. In waking life, collective perception already shapes the world. Laws, languages, cultures are agreements of the mind. Dreams might reveal a hidden layer of this collective construction. Another scientific angle is neurochemistry. During dreaming, neurotransmitters like acetylcholine surge, while others like serotonin and norepinephrine decrease. This creates a mental environment where memory is fluid, logic is less strict, and emotion is heightened. It's a biochemical shift that alters the framework of reality itself. When we change the chemistry, we change the world we perceive. This demonstrates, once again, that reality is not rigid but dependent on the state of consciousness. Even more striking is the connection between dreams and creativity. As we saw earlier, many inventions, works of art, and scientific breakthroughs were born in dreams. This suggests that dream logic is not nonsense, but a creative mode of consciousness that accesses ideas beyond normal waking constraints. It may be that dreams give us access to deeper layers of reality, where rigid boundaries dissolve and new possibilities emerge. Creativity itself could be proof that consciousness is not confined to the rules of ordinary perception. Let's pause here and ask a profound question. If dreams allow us to experience realities that feel real, what does that say about the reality we are in right now? Could it be that waking life is just another layer of dream, more stable and consistent, but still shaped by the same consciousness that generates dream worlds? Philosophers from Plato to modern thinkers have entertained this idea. Plato's allegory of the cave, for instance, suggested that what we see is only shadows of a deeper truth. Dreams may be the mind's way of reminding us that shadows and light are not always easy to distinguish. The flexibility of dreams points toward a larger pattern, that reality, whether waking or dreaming, is not absolute but relational. It depends on perception, context, and the state of consciousness. Just as physics shows that time and space are relative rather than absolute, psychology and neuroscience show that perception and identity are also relative. Dreams magnify this flexibility, demonstrating it in extreme form, but the same principle applies everywhere. One of the most profound questions raised by dreams is whether they reveal layers of reality we cannot access while awake. Neuroscientists typically define dreams as internal simulations, but that definition doesn't explain why they feel so immersive, meaningful, and at times predictive. Throughout history, people have reported dreams that foreshadow events, solve problems, or reveal insights that waking logic couldn't provide. Could this mean that dreams allow consciousness to tap into patterns of reality beyond the ordinary senses? From a scientific perspective, dreams often reflect what the brain is processing. When you learn a new skill, for instance, your brain replays elements of it in your dreams. Studies have shown that people who dream about a task, such as learning a musical instrument or navigating a maze, improve more than those who don't. This suggests that dreams are not only simulations, but powerful tools for integrating information, reinforcing memory, and preparing the brain for future challenges. The line between imagination and reality blurs again, since what you practice in the dream affects waking performance. But dreams also seem to access connections we don't consciously notice. Many people have had the experience of waking with the solution to a problem they couldn't solve the night before. This happens because dreams bypass the rigid filters of logic, allowing new associations to form. The brain in dream mode makes leaps across distant ideas, linking them in unexpected ways. What feels like dream nonsense is often the mind exploring connections that are invisible to linear thought. When we wake, those connections can appear as sudden insight. This creative function shows that dream logic, while strange, is a valid form of knowledge. Now let's take this further. If dreams are capable of revealing insights that waking logic misses, could they also reveal truths about reality itself? Some researchers propose that dreams are a kind of virtual reality, where the brain experiments with alternate models of the world. In this view, dreams aren't random at all. They are simulations designed to test different ways of experiencing reality. By bending time, space, and causality, dreams expand the range of possible realities the mind can imagine. This suggests that reality is not limited to one form, but exists as a spectrum of possibilities. Quantum mechanics again provides a parallel. At the fundamental level, particles don't occupy single states, but exist as probabilities across many potential outcomes. It is only when observed that they collapse into one definite reality. Dreams can be seen as consciousness playing in this field of probabilities, exploring what other versions of reality might feel like. When you wake, your mind collapses back into the more stable version of reality we call waking life. If this analogy holds, then dreams are not random. They are glimpses into the flexibility of existence. Another angle worth considering is the phenomenon of lucid dreaming. When dreamers become aware they are dreaming, they can consciously shape the dream world. They can decide to fly, walk through walls, or summon objects at will. This shows that thought and intention directly control reality in the dream state. Waking life may be slower and more constrained, but it shows similar patterns. Focus, belief, and intention shape perception, memory, and even the body's biology. Lucid dreaming is simply a concentrated example of this principle, demonstrating the potential power of consciousness when freed from external limits. This brings us to a radical possibility that dreams and waking life are not separate domains, but parts of one continuous spectrum of consciousness. In this spectrum, reality changes depending on the state of awareness. Dreams represent one end of the spectrum, where consciousness is free to shape reality almost instantly. Waking life represents the other end, where reality is more stable, governed by consistent physical laws and collective agreement. But both are experiences constructed by consciousness, and both reveal the flexibility of what we call real. Psychologists have also studied hypnagogia, the transitional state between wakefulness and sleep. In this state, people often experience vivid imagery, auditory hallucinations, or even sensations of floating and shifting. Hypnagogia blurs the line between dream and waking reality, showing how thin the boundary actually is. Some inventors and artists deliberately use this state to harvest ideas, because it allows access to the creativity of dream logic while retaining a degree of waking control. This suggests that reality is not made of separate compartments, but is a continuum of states, each revealing different aspects of how mind constructs experience. Now consider the role of culture. In many traditions, dreams are not dismissed as random noise, but valued as sources of wisdom. Indigenous cultures often treat dreams as messages, guidance, or even journeys into other realms. Ancient civilizations recorded dreams carefully, seeing them as communications from gods or the deeper self. While modern science often interprets dreams in strictly neurological terms, the persistence of these cultural views suggests that dreams touch something beyond the purely biological. They hint at a shared intuition that dreams connect consciousness to a broader, more fluid reality. Of course, science demands evidence, and most researchers remain cautious about claims that dreams reveal hidden truths of the universe. But even within a scientific framework, the evidence points toward flexibility. Dreams demonstrate that perception, identity, time, and space are not fixed but constructed. They show that consciousness is capable of generating immersive realities without external input. And they remind us that waking life shares these same mechanisms, only with more consistency and collective reinforcement. When we look at dreams through the lens of cognitive science, one key feature emerges: the brain's ability to generate coherent worlds without input from the external senses. During dreaming, sensory signals from the outside world are largely blocked, yet the mind continues to create vivid landscapes, characters, and narratives. This tells us that the brain does not simply record reality, it actively constructs it. In waking life, sensory data provides the framework, but in dreams, the mind alone produces the experience. This difference highlights how much of reality is already shaped internally rather than objectively given. This has profound implications for how we understand consciousness itself. If the brain can create entire worlds in sleep, then waking reality may also be more flexible than we assume. What we take as solid and external may actually be a shared construction, held together by consensus and biological limits. Dreams expose this hidden mechanism by stripping away external anchors. They reveal the raw, creative power of consciousness to generate reality. One fascinating area of study is the role of emotions in shaping dreams. Neuroscience has shown that the amygdala, a structure involved in emotional processing, is highly active during REM sleep. This suggests that dreams are deeply influenced by feelings, often more than by rational thought. That's why dreams can shift dramatically based on mood. Anxiety may turn them into nightmares, while joy can create euphoric dreamscapes. If emotions guide dream reality so directly, it raises a question. Do emotions also shape waking reality in subtle ways? Research on psychosomatic effects and the placebo response strongly suggests they do. This blurs the distinction between dream and waking once again. Another important perspective comes from philosophy. The 17th century thinker René Descartes famously asked how we can know that waking life is not just another dream. His point was not that life is literally a dream, but that dreams prove how easily we can be deceived by our own consciousness. If dreams feel real while we are in them, then certainty about waking reality becomes difficult. Descartes used this reasoning to question the reliability of the senses, and it still resonates today as we explore how the mind constructs experience. Modern philosophy has extended this argument, linking it with simulation theory. The idea is that if dreams can generate convincing realities nightly, perhaps our waking experience is also a simulation, albeit a more stable one. While simulation theory often refers to advanced technology, the human brain itself functions as a simulator. It takes data, processes it, and projects a world we then inhabit. Dreams remind us that consciousness does not passively reflect the world, it builds one. Another remarkable element of dreaming is how time behaves. In dreams, hours can seem to pass in minutes, or entire lifetimes can be lived in a single night. This shows that our perception of time is not fixed, but constructed by the brain. Neuroscience suggests that time in dreams is compressed because the brain is processing vast amounts of information quickly, unconstrained by the need to synchronize with external clocks. This raises the possibility that waking time, too, is more flexible than we realize, regulated by perception rather than an absolute external flow. If time is partly an illusion, dreams expose its malleability. Now let's consider the link between dream logic and problem solving. Studies have shown that REM sleep enhances creative thinking, in part because dreams bypass the rigid filters of waking consciousness. Famous discoveries, such as the periodic table by Mendeleev and the sewing machine needle design by Elias Howe, were inspired by dreams. These examples reveal how dream logic, often dismissed as bizarre, can tap into deep levels of creativity. Dreams do not just reflect waking concerns, they reconfigure information in novel ways, sometimes producing breakthroughs that reshape reality itself. This brings us to the role of unconscious processes. Much of what we call reality is filtered through unconscious mechanisms before reaching awareness. Dreams make this process visible by dramatizing hidden thoughts, fears, and desires. Freud interpreted dreams as expressions of the unconscious, while Jung saw them as bridges to collective archetypes. Modern neuroscience doesn't fully align with these views, but it acknowledges that dreams provide a window into mental processes that shape our waking lives. In this sense, dreams are not only stories the brain tells, but also messages from the deeper layers of consciousness that influence how we perceive reality. Interestingly, experiments with lucid dreamers have shown that deliberate actions in dreams can have measurable effects on the body. For example, when lucid dreamers practice physical movements while dreaming, their brain activity mirrors that of actual movement, and muscle reflexes sometimes respond. This suggests that the boundary between dream action and waking action is thinner than we think. If intentional acts in dreams influence waking physiology, then dreams are not entirely separate. They are part of the same continuum of mind-body interaction. Some researchers argue that dreams evolved as a way to simulate threats. The threat simulation theory suggests that by practicing dangerous situations in a safe environment, our ancestors improved their survival chances. This evolutionary perspective frames dreams as a biological strategy. But even if dreams evolved for survival, their flexibility shows how adaptable reality is when filtered through consciousness. They not only simulate threats, but also generate imaginative worlds far beyond immediate survival needs. This indicates that the mind naturally explores possibilities, not just necessities. Taken together, these insights show that dreams are more than mental noise. They are laboratories of reality, where consciousness experiments with different versions of existence. They demonstrate that perception, time, identity, and even physical response are not fixed, but flexible. By studying dreams, we glimpse the mechanisms by which consciousness constructs reality itself. And by reflecting on them, we begin to question how much of waking life is shaped by the same hidden processes. Throughout history, dreams have been seen as portals to other realms of reality. Ancient cultures often treated dreams not as illusions, but as messages, visions, or glimpses into hidden layers of existence. In Mesopotamia, dreams were thought to be communications from the gods, carrying instructions or warnings. The Egyptians kept elaborate dream manuals that attempted to decode symbolic meanings. In Greece, temples of Asclepius invited people to sleep and dream in hopes of receiving healing visions. These traditions suggest that for much of human history, dreams were not dismissed as fantasy, but revered as encounters with deeper truths. When we compare these cultural interpretations with modern science, an interesting pattern emerges. While neuroscience explains dreams as brain activity, the cultural view highlights their symbolic and transformative role. Both perspectives reveal something about flexibility. One shows the biological plasticity of the brain, the other shows how societies mold meaning. Together, they suggest that reality itself is partly constructed by interpretation. The dream world is flexible because the waking world is flexible, filtered through context, culture, and belief. Another perspective comes from Eastern philosophies. In Hinduism and Buddhism, dreams are often seen as metaphors for the illusory nature of waking life. The concept of Maya in Hindu thought describes the world as a kind of grand illusion, not unlike a dream. In Tibetan Buddhism, dream yoga is practiced as a way of gaining insight into the flexible nature of reality. Practitioners learn to recognize dreams as dreams while sleeping, using that awareness to understand the waking state as equally constructed. This approach aligns surprisingly well with findings from lucid dreaming research in neuroscience. Both traditions point toward the same conclusion, that reality is not as fixed as it appears. In the West, psychology also contributed to this discussion. Freud believed that dreams revealed unconscious desires, cloaked in symbolic disguise. Jung expanded this idea by proposing that dreams tap into the collective unconscious, connecting individuals to shared archetypes. While modern science has moved beyond some of these theories, their underlying message is still relevant. Dreams expose layers of the mind that shape how we perceive reality. Even if Freud and Jung were not entirely correct, their focus on dreams as meaningful processes rather than random noise helped establish the idea that consciousness is flexible. Modern research into altered states of consciousness also connects with this theme. Psychedelic experiences, for example, often produce dreamlike visions where logic bends, time shifts, and identities dissolve. Neuroscientists studying psychedelics have found that they reduce activity in the brain's default mode network, the system that maintains a stable sense of self and reality. Interestingly, this same network shows altered activity during REM sleep. Both dreaming and psychedelic states disrupt the usual filters, allowing consciousness to experience reality in more fluid ways. The similarity between these states strengthens the idea that dreams are not anomalies, but part of a spectrum of conscious experiences that reveal the brain's capacity to reshape perception. Another way to see dreams as evidence of flexible reality is through the study of false awakenings. In these experiences, a dreamer believes they have woken up, only to realize later that they are still dreaming. Sometimes this cycle repeats multiple times. False awakenings highlight how easily the mind can generate convincing replicas of waking life, complete with familiar environments and routines. For the dreamer, each false awakening feels real until proven otherwise. These experiences blur the boundary between dream and waking in dramatic fashion, suggesting that reality is always subject to verification by consciousness, rather than existing as a guaranteed constant. The neuroscience of memory adds another layer. Dreams often distort or recombine memories, blending fragments of different times and places into new narratives. This demonstrates the malleability of memory itself. Studies have shown that human memory is not a perfect recording device, but a reconstructive process, constantly reshaping past experiences to fit present needs. If both memory and dreams work by reconstructing rather than replaying reality, then our sense of continuity is built on shifting ground. Reality, as we know it, is stitched together from fragments that the mind arranges into coherence. Dreams are simply the most visible expression of this ongoing flexibility. There is also a fascinating link between dreams and neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself. During REM sleep, the brain strengthens neural connections, consolidates learning, and reorganizes information. Dreams may be part of this process, providing simulations that help reinforce or adjust patterns. If so, then dreams are not just reflections of reality, but tools for reshaping it. They actively participate in constructing the version of reality we will inhabit upon waking. The fact that new skills and memories can be integrated through dreams demonstrates how fluid the boundary is between dream experience and waking ability. Philosophy has also wrestled with this flexibility. The philosopher David Hume argued that our belief in a stable external world is a habit of the mind, not a logical certainty. He noted that perceptions come in sequences and we assume continuity, but there is no proof that reality exists outside those perceptions. Dreams exemplify his point, showing that continuity and coherence can be generated internally. Modern philosophers like Thomas Metzinger have extended this idea, proposing that the self itself is a kind of dream, a model created by the brain to organize experience. From this perspective, dreaming is not an exception, but the rule. Waking life is simply the brain's most consistent dream. Even physics offers metaphors that resonate with dream logic. Quantum mechanics shows that particles exist in superpositions until observed, meaning reality is not fully determined until consciousness interacts with it. While this is not directly the same as dreaming, the parallels are striking. Both suggest that reality is not absolute, but contingent, shaped by interaction. Dreams provide an intimate example of this principle at the level of individual consciousness, while quantum physics describes it at the level of the universe. The common thread is that reality's flexibility may be a fundamental property rather than a side effect. By weaving together cultural traditions, psychological theories, neuroscientific findings, and philosophical reflections, we see a consistent theme. Dreams reveal the plasticity of reality. They are not merely private hallucinations, but demonstrations of how consciousness interacts with perception, memory, time, and meaning. If dreams can create convincing realities nightly, then perhaps waking life is not as rigid as we tend to believe. The dream state becomes a reminder that reality is not a fixed stage, but a fluid process, one that consciousness participates in shaping. If dreams demonstrate that reality can be bent, reshaped, or even generated entirely within the mind, then a natural question arises. What does this say about the ultimate nature of reality? Is waking life fundamentally different from a dream, or could it be just another layer in a spectrum of flexible realities? One line of thought that addresses this is simulation theory. Proposed most prominently by philosopher Nick Bostrom, it suggests that advanced civilizations could one day have the computing power to simulate entire universes, complete with conscious beings who believe their world is real. If such simulations are possible, then the probability that our universe is one of them is not zero. It may even be high. Dreams become a personal analogy for this idea. Just as your brain simulates a convincing reality every night, a more advanced intelligence could simulate entire worlds. The fact that you can inhabit dream worlds that feel solid and authentic suggests that consciousness does not require a fixed external stage. It can thrive within simulations, whether personal or cosmic. Neuroscience also hints at this flexibility by showing that the brain operates as a prediction machine. According to the predictive processing model, the brain constantly generates predictions about sensory input and updates them with incoming data. Perception, in this view, is not a direct reflection of reality, but a controlled hallucination guided by expectations. Dreams demonstrate what happens when external input is largely removed. The brain continues to generate predictions, creating a self-contained world. Waking life is not categorically different. It simply has more external constraints. Both states reveal that reality, as we experience it, is a construction shaped by consciousness. This leads to another question. If perception is a construction, what anchors it? Some argue that physical laws provide the stable framework, but even here we find flexibility. Einstein showed that time and space are relative, not absolute. Quantum mechanics demonstrates that reality exists in probabilities until measured. These scientific discoveries suggest that the bedrock of reality is not solid, but dynamic, more like the shifting logic of dreams than the unchanging stage we often imagine. The deeper science goes, the less rigid reality appears. Dreams also invite us to consider the role of meaning. In waking life, we assume that events are driven by objective causality, but in dreams, logic often bends to emotional significance. A small detail can expand into an entire scenario if it carries weight for the dreamer. Interestingly, psychological research shows that waking perception is also shaped by emotional and cognitive filters. We notice what matters to us, interpret events through personal frameworks, and often overlook details that do not fit our mental models. In this sense, waking reality is already dreamlike, structured not purely by external conditions, but by internal priorities. Dreams exaggerate this principle, but they do not invent it. Another frontier for understanding flexible reality comes from studies of virtual reality. When immersed in a VR simulation, the brain can quickly accept artificial environments as real, even if they are visually simple. The sense of presence, the feeling of actually being there, depends less on the quality of graphics and more on the brain's willingness to commit to the experience. Dreams demonstrate the same principle, producing convincing realities out of the brain's internal signals. The overlap between dreaming and VR shows how adaptable consciousness is in adopting new realities. It also raises the possibility that what we call base reality may itself be just another layer of a simulation, accepted because we have no contrasting state to compare it against. Near-death experiences provide another perspective. People who have been revived from clinical death often report vivid, dreamlike journeys, floating outside the body, entering radiant landscapes, or meeting deceased loved ones. These experiences are remarkably consistent across cultures. Neuroscience suggests that surges of brain activity during trauma may produce these visions, but the compelling detail and coherence of such experiences raise profound questions. If the brain can generate entire realities at the threshold of death, indistinguishable from waking life, then consciousness clearly has the capacity to exist outside ordinary parameters. Whether or not near-death experiences reflect literal other realms, they demonstrate the same principle as dreams. Consciousness can shape flexible realities with startling depth and persistence. Artificial intelligence is also beginning to intersect with this discussion. Large language models and generative AI can produce coherent stories, images, and even interactive environments. In a way, they dream. They recombine patterns from past data into new creations that did not exist before. Observing AI's growing ability to generate simulated realities invites us to reflect on our own minds. Dreams show us that the brain is already an advanced generative system, producing entire experiential worlds nightly. If we can build machines that mimic this process, then perhaps reality itself is a generative phenomenon, arising from rules and probabilities rather than fixed structures. The question that follows is whether there is a fundamental dreamer behind it all. Religious and mystical traditions often describe reality as the dream of a cosmic mind, whether that mind is God, Brahman, or universal consciousness. While science does not confirm this view, it does not dismiss it either. The parallels between dreaming, predictive perception, and quantum uncertainty all leave room for interpretations in which consciousness plays a central role in shaping reality. If waking life is flexible, then consciousness may not just observe reality, but actively participate in its unfolding. At this stage, we return to the idea that dreams are proof of flexibility. They are not separate from reality, but continuous with it. They remind us that perception, meaning, and experience are all malleable, constructed processes. Whether through predictive models, simulated environments, or the pliability of time and space itself, everything we know as reality is subject to transformation. Dreams reveal this nightly in microcosm. But the same principle applies to the macrocosm of waking life and possibly even the cosmos itself. If consciousness can bend reality within the dream state, and if waking reality is also a construction, then perhaps the difference between dream and waking is not one of kind, but of degree. One is simply a looser, freer expression of flexibility, while the other is constrained by rules we call physical laws. But those laws, as modern physics shows, are not absolute. They too may be flexible at deeper levels. In this light, dreams are not escapes from reality, but demonstrations of its true nature, fluid, dynamic, and shaped by the mind. We've explored dreams from many angles: neuroscience, physics, philosophy, and even the possibility of simulated worlds. At the core of it all is one central theme. Dreams are not meaningless fragments of the mind, but windows into the flexible nature of reality itself. They show us that consciousness can generate entire worlds, obeying rules that feel solid and coherent in the moment, yet dissolving when we awaken. That very dissolving is the clue. Reality, whether in dreams or waking life, is a construction shaped by the mind and the frameworks it uses. When you dream, you enter a world where time can stretch or collapse, where people appear and vanish, where landscapes shift with your emotions. Yet in those moments, you don't question it. It feels real. This demonstrates that your sense of reality is not anchored in unchanging truth, but in the consistency of experience. Waking life works the same way. As long as perceptions align and causality seems stable, you believe in the solidity of the world around you. Dreams reveal that this solidity is more fragile than it appears. Science itself points toward flexibility. Quantum mechanics tells us that particles exist as probabilities until observed. Relativity shows that time and space are not fixed backdrops, but dynamic, relative to the observer. Neuroscience demonstrates that perception is a prediction shaped by expectation. In all these cases, reality depends not solely on external structures, but on interaction with consciousness. Dreams magnify this truth, showing us a reality unconstrained by external data, but still deeply convincing. What does this mean for us? It suggests that consciousness is not a passive observer, but an active participant in reality's unfolding. If the mind can dream entire worlds, and if waking life is also a constructed model, then perhaps the boundary between the two is less rigid than we assume. Some traditions suggest that life itself is a dream within a greater dream, with awakening meaning not just leaving sleep, but recognizing the mind's role in shaping existence. Even if you do not adopt such interpretations, there is a practical takeaway. Reality is more malleable than it appears. Our thoughts, emotions, and expectations influence not only how we perceive the world, but how we act within it, shaping outcomes. Just as a dream bends to the dreamer's state of mind, waking life bends to the models we project onto it. Understanding this does not mean denying the physical world, but recognizing that consciousness and reality are deeply intertwined. Now, as you prepare to rest, consider this. When you close your eyes tonight, you may once again find yourself in a world where rules are rewritten and the impossible becomes ordinary. Let those dreams remind you that reality itself is not as fixed as it seems. The universe is not a rigid stage, but a flexible, living process in which you, as a conscious being, are an essential part. So as you drift into sleep, remember that your dreams are not just private fantasies, but demonstrations of the mind's extraordinary capacity to create. They are proof that reality is flexible, that consciousness shapes experience, and that the boundary between waking and dreaming is only a veil. Thin, permeable, and full of mystery. Thank you for joining me tonight on Sleep Space and for exploring this profound question. Are dreams proof that reality is flexible? As you rest, may your dreams open doorways into new possibilities, and may your waking life be touched by the wonder they reveal.